Hi guys, welcome everyone to another episode of the Macros Bodybuilding and Powerlifting Podcast. Hi Mark.
Hey guys, how we doing?
So today we're going to talk about superfoods, just literally because I looked at the Daily Mail of all sort of references and saw superfoods was coming up again, and they just seem to just always be there. And for people who are maybe familiar with me and Mark and our work, you might be like, yeah, we know what you're talking about. We can see why you're frustrated about superfoods. But for others, I think you might be thinking, what's this hate with superfoods? They're super. So we thought we'd go over the topic of superfoods, kind of what they are, whether they are superfoods, and how, as individuals, can we appreciate them and where they should maybe be within our diet and within our kind of nutritional ideas. First of all, like Mark was pretty unwell last week with hay fever. I've had a cold all week, so if I sound a bit snotty or kind of croaky, that's why. So I apologize first up. Obviously, I haven't been eating enough superfoods. So I'm going to pass it now over to Mark and kind of give you, what do you see a superfood as, Mark? What kind of, in the supermarkets, kind of give the guys an idea of what a superfood is generally marketed as?
Yeah, so I think most of the time superfoods are marketed as either like in a smoothie type bottle of liquid that you can get, or we've got berries, flax seeds, nuts, all these kind of nutrient dense foods that are health beneficial and have definitely got, I think as people who work with clients, we would definitely be suggesting that our clients consider these as part of a wider nutrient dense diet. But a lot of times the superfoods are marketed in such a way that there's never really any consideration to their overall, or the energy within that food or liquid. So you'll have people suggesting that if you take this superfood, then everything's going to be great and you're going to lose all the weight, and they really do get marketed in a poor fashion as far as I'm concerned. Whereas and again, of course, having these foods in your diet is important, and because they are nutrient dense and as part of a wider kind of overall diet, then they're great. But yeah, I didn't explain that very well at all.
I think you got the point across that I think is important. You have to talk about the nutritional priorities. Look at us both coughing. We're going to be talking about superfoods and how maybe they're not like the be all and end all. And people are going to be like, you're not eating enough superfood, man. That's why you're sick. That's definitely why we're sick.
I haven't had enough goju berries today. I should take some more goju berries.
I don't think I've ever eaten a goji berry in my life.
No, but I think that's just the problem. It's when the superfoods get marketed, they don't really get, so they just get branded as a superfood, but nobody really knows why they're a superfood, or nobody really knows what the health benefits might be to taking that food again as part of an overall kind of well-balanced diet.
That's the trouble. I think a superfood is literally just like a supplement, like we talked about last week. I don't know whether we reference to it, but literally every single supplement will say can provide like enhanced whatever the benefit if it's in context of a well-rounded diet. So just like a superfood could be quite beneficial, but only in the context of a well-rounded diet, which I think you were alluding to before in terms of the fact, yeah, it's got goji berries, it's got nuts, it's got coconut oil, it's got all this amazing stuff that's nutrient dense, but it's also calorie dense. There's no reference to the total calories, which when we talk about nutritional priorities on our pyramid, calories are the base, energy balance is king. And if you don't refer to that and you end up putting on weight because you're eating too many superfoods, it doesn't matter how super for you they say they are, they're not necessarily going to do what you want them to.
Absolutely. And it does happen. And it's something that a lot of people really struggle to separate, is because they've just been bombarded with things like, I think more recently, or maybe it's just dying off now, I'm not sure, but coconut oil become really popular as a superfood, and everyone was getting told to take coconut oil, whether it was to cook their meals with or to put in coffee as well. I think at one point people were putting bulletproof coffees. I mean, if you're trying to lose body fat and you're on lesser calories anyway, putting coconut oil in your coffee, it's just, that is not going to help. If you've, I can't imagine it tasting very nice at all. But if you like coconut oil in your coffee, or you like to cook with coconut oil, that's great. But it might be an idea to work out, how many calories are in coconut oil per 100 grams, and then have a serving of it based on, your own kind of calories and macros, rather than just whacking coconut oil in for every meal that you cook. And you could see just by that little example how that could become a problem if you were trying to control calories to lose body fat.
Yeah, I think the only way something like the bulletproof coffee has shown to have success with people, and they've been like, it's not the calories, it's the coconut oil and the bulletproof coffee that's doing it for me, is the fact that, one, caffeine provides satiety, and then two, liquid just in general, having some liquid going in you provides some satiety because it just fills the stomach.
Yeah.
And then three, because it's a bunch of calories and it's fat, which actually kind of slows digestion, and it can be quite satiating for some individuals. And so the combination of all of that, if you're having it, it could maybe prevent you maybe snacking on more calories later, but you can't get around the energy balance rule, the law of thermodynamics. It will only have reduced calories like so many diets do, because it's kind of put something in place that has caused a restriction of calories. It's not anything special to do with necessarily coconut oil or anything like that. Mark, do you eat what kind of foods, when you talked about with your people at Revive Stronger, recommendations of foods to eat, you said tend to go to a majority of nutrient dense foods. What sort of nutrient dense foods do you kind of go for generally day to day?
So I like, if it's myself, I pretty much have any kind of vegetables, any kind of fruit. I don't really have much preferences. If it's clients, I do like to see probably a minimum of 2 pieces of fruit per day, and then 2 or 3 servings of like a decent portion of vegetables. And then I'd also prefer, on top of that, I mean, if they could do that to start off with, I think that's brilliant. If they really, really like I have an apple and a banana every day, but I also have probably, like, some days I'll have some blueberries, or some days I'll have some strawberries, and I kind of mix it up along with that. But I think if a client was to just start taking an apple and a banana every day, I think that was a good start. If they were going to have 2 portions of broccoli a day, I think that's a good start. But then, just to kind of put the icing on the cake, I'd prefer to see a little bit more variety there as well. Broccoli is a brilliant vegetable, very fibrous and very filling. So apple, banana, the same. But just to make sure that all the nutrients were covered, and we're getting a nice wide variety, I'd probably prefer to see a little bit more variety going in that diet along the way. But I don't mind if it was just a client starting off who's never particularly taken any interest in veg or fruits, I don't mind them going just finding something they like and sticking with that for a while. But I would prefer to start to see more variation in their diet, again, just to cover their kind of nutritional basis.
What I find really fascinating with the idea that people, I think some people might get put off that they can't, because like you named apples, bananas, these are very cheap fruits and they are really nutritious, but you do not get everything that maybe a blueberry gives you. But you'd be better off having an apple and then some blueberries and then a banana, maybe, and like having that variety than just having the blueberries because they're a superfood, which is a point we're trying to get across, that just because something's named a superfood doesn't mean it's actually superior to anything else. It just means it has, I think superfoods, they actually, like, to be called a superfood, it has to have a certain number of micronutrients per like 100 grams or per serving or something along those lines. It's not anything special necessarily about that food. And if you feel like, oh, I can't eat healthily because I can't afford these superfoods, it's completely false. Something like a banana is incredibly cheap and in its own right, maybe a superfood because of all the benefits it has with it.
Yeah.
And that's something I find very interesting, is the fact that something like a multivitamin is very much frowned upon, when in reality, it probably is more micronutrient dense than any, I don't know if it's more micronutrient dense than any superfood, but it's probably right up there with them. Yet it's seen as something bad and not necessarily good to have. Whereas in reality, it's probably actually fairly beneficial for someone who maybe can only eat that apple, banana, because maybe they can't afford to eat blueberries and the foods out there, or maybe they just don't like them. So then having something like the multivitamin is kind of like that shotgun approach. You get that variety there for a very cheap amount. Have you experienced people kind of hating against maybe green powders, vegetable powders and multivitamins?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. It just comes, it kind of comes back to being the whole, natural, or whatever natural really even means. But yeah, I think, especially with the multivitamin, I know for a fact that people actively avoid like taking multivitamins or fish oils or these things that will, like you said, that shotgun effect, that will be very handy in your diet for a kind of cover-all basis. And I would much rather people taking that multivitamin than just having, like you said, only an apple or only green beans for their vegetable intake, because they're just going to get a lot more micronutrition. I obviously would prefer if they were taking, I don't think anyone would argue the fact that most of our intake should be coming from like fresh, minimally processed foods. I think nobody's going to argue that point. But if you are a person who struggles for whatever reason, whether it's you just don't like the taste or texture of certain fruits and vegetables, then I think multivitamins and supplements in general, I think just like we were talking about last week with the supplement issue, they are there. They can be very useful, and they do most definitely have a place in a diet. But then there's even the cost. You mentioned about the cost. Okay, there are fruits that do cost quite a lot of money, and they are expensive. I think it's obviously down to the fact that they're quite labor intense. Like picking berries, you've got to have somebody picking berries and manufacturing them and boxing them, and it could be a long process, and that's probably where the cost comes from. But then you've got the option, like I buy frozen berries for a fraction of the price that I could buy fresh berries for. And contrary to belief, frozen berries are fresh berries. They've just been frozen fresh. So you're still going to be getting all the. In fact, there might even be an argument that frozen berries are more beneficial because they're going to keep for longer. They're not going to go off, and they're so versatile. You can be put them in smoothies or your breakfast. So yeah, there's although there's a cost involved with some of these foods, you can make, or you can get them cheaper just by doing things like bunch buying or frozen selections. Frozen fruits are a great one, I think.
Oh, for sure. Sorry, I think I lost you a little bit, but I got the overall kind of message, which is great. Yeah, frozen fruits, frozen vegetables. I mean, they should, like you said, be a bit fresher, because actually they're frozen literally so that they haven't gone over like the transportation process, didn't lost any nutrients that way necessarily. Yeah. Sorry. And something else I always point out is actually things like tinned fruits, tinned vegetables. Although they're seen like even in my head, I'm like, that can't be healthier. That can't be, not necessarily healthier, but that can't be a good thing. They're actually fine. They're actually really quite a good and nutritious source that's also cheap. But I think it's more getting people's minds around it. And when you can, like you said, because we're talking about berries a lot of the time, they're expensive, but they're nowhere near as expensive as having an actual superfood shake or smoothie, and having one of those daily, which are actually going to be really energy dense as well. You can get a lot of these things, like you can buy frozen, you can buy in bulk, you can buy nuts and seeds in bulk online. Peanut butter isn't that expensive, and in fact, not necessarily a superfood, but it's definitely a healthy source of fats in context of a good overall diet, which is always going to be key. Something I want to talk about, and I don't know if you've got an opinion on this, Mark, is people really frown upon processed foods. And I know we talk about the fact 80% of the diet should be wholesome, minimally processed foods, but there are some processed foods that have been fortified with additional benefits. So maybe like kids cereal. Have you got any thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts on some of those kind of being in our diet? Is it a problem?
Again, I think what we'll have to be clear on is what processed food actually really means. And it's just foods that have gone through a process. What the process is could be anything, depending on what food you were talking about. I mean, you could say that, this might be picking the bones out of it, but you could say that putting blueberries into a box is a process to then be manufactured. It's a process. Although I think what most people would consider the processed food would maybe be like, ready-made meals, or like you said, cereals, all these kind of processed foods. And yeah, I think again, if there's no food in isolation that's necessarily, just like there's no superfoods, there's no foods that are going to be necessarily be just wrong to eat or bad to eat or make you gain fat or take you further away from your goals. There's nothing going to happen in isolation. And again, as part of a wider nutrient dense diet, then processed foods are, I mean, I have processed foods. I've usually got something, whether it's just, like cooked chicken in a packet. I've always got some of that in the fridge for days that I'm maybe running a bit late. I just don't have time to do any cooking. I've even got, I know Tesco's do that range where there's mashed potatoes or mashed root veg. That's been processed, and it's always in my fridge because it's very handy for me, especially on days when I'm working late or I've been particularly busy one day. It's really easy for me to just take that out of the fridge. It's still nutrient dense. It was really cheap to buy, and it's convenient. It can be made in 5 minutes, along with maybe some frozen vegetables or tinned vegetables. I don't eat like that every day, but yeah, it was, that kind of, in that balance, in that context of an overall healthy diet, there's no problems for me at all with processed foods.
Yeah, I think it can get really confusing, especially with those sort of foods, because in a sense, when you're buying pre-made mashed potato, for example, which I've had from Sainsbury's and much better than what I can make, it's, what have they done? They've just basically made the mashed potato for you. They haven't necessarily done a load of weird processing to it. They've added loads of weird things to it. It's probably gone through a machine, it's been mashed, they've added some butter and seasoning, which is basically what you do, and then it's been put in a container into the fridge. So when that's a process, yes, it's a processed food, but not necessarily a really bad thing to have. I think when we're talking about processed foods, a lot of the kind of tricky ones that are going to catch you out, that you shouldn't have in huge amounts, are the ones where they're really low in fiber, they're really, really tasty, they haven't been fortified, they haven't got any real nutrients in them. Maybe something like cookies, ice cream, pastries, those sort of things, where there really is nothing that's going to necessarily benefit your diet apart from the energy that it's giving you. Those are the ones that you have to be really quite careful of, because something like, I'm going to go there, pizza, because I absolutely love it. When you think about a pizza, you think about the base, that's basically bread, it's dough, some oil, and then the rest of it, basically, tomatoes, vegetables. All comes in is when it's all the processed meats that might get on there. And that's only really a trouble when you have it all the time. If it's put into context of a calorie controlled diet where you're not eating those meats all the time, and most of your meats are maybe kind of chicken and fish, then you're probably in a really fine place, or don't even necessarily get pizza with those on all the time. I just think it's this also danger of the process comes in. What I get annoyed with this is shakes that are called superfood shakes, maybe, and they're actually, because they're ground up, all the fiber is basically gone. It's basically now a juice, and they say they contain all like this benefit. But if you drink a juice, there's actually been studies shown. So people drink the calorific juice, they don't recognize, the body doesn't necessarily recognize the calories. They're not controlling the calories here. So then later in the day, the person actually overconsumes. They don't, the body isn't very good at recognizing like liquid calories. It does it with milk. I've seen Lara McDonald looked into a research study. It does it with milk, but like Coke and juice and liquid calories like that, the body isn't very good at kind of feeling full from that. It doesn't necessarily give it fullness and satisfaction signals. Obviously you get those nutrients, but this is in the context of that king, which is the energy balance, the calories at the bottom.
That's interesting. That's interesting to know. I wasn't exactly sure of that point you just made there about not quite recognizing liquid calories, and I think it's absolutely right though. It's so easy to overconsume on liquid calories, and again, if you're trying to alter body composition, if you're trying to lose body fat, reduce body fat, lose weight, you know, you could be drinking, if you're drinking 1, 2, 3 of these superfood shakes per day. I don't know off the top of my head, but there might be like, I don't know, 150 calories in these. Some of the ones that I see, like typically in the shop or garage. You know, that's quite a lot of calories for a very small amount of liquid. And you can, if you're not accounting for that in your daily calories and macros, then that's where people can really get frustrated, because they're not losing weight, but they're eating all these, you know, clean foods, superfoods. They're having the smoothies, they're having the coconut oil and the handful of nuts every day, and also what led to that is a handful of nuts is very, very different for everyone. I'd much prefer people maybe weighed out 10 or 15 grams or 20 grams of nuts rather than a handful. I've seen what my handful of nuts can look like. Yeah, that's a handful, man. You could literally scoop up 500 calories of nuts and eat it quite no problem at all. So I think it's very worth knowing that it's very much a branded thing, and it's very much a kind of market gimmicky, doesn't really mean anything. There's nothing much super about superfoods at all. And if you've got a nice varied balanced diet, then yeah, you're probably going to be fine anyway. But again, yeah, calories are definitely king. In fact, I would also say that I've had, and this is coming from experience actually, I've actually dealt with a client like this who was struggling to lose weight, but they were eating very clean kind of diary. So when the food diary was sent across, it was very kind of quote unquote, clean foods. It was all minimally processed stuff. There was just a lot of it. There was a lot of oils, coconut oil, and nuts. That's why I brought up nuts, because this particular person was having a lot of these nuts. And flaxseed as well. And flaxseed is actually something that I use from time to time, but in controlled portions, and not just put in half a bag in. So yeah, and for this person, it's less important, or this is very individual to myself. I don't know how you feel about this, but I would say it's more important that this person starts to lose body fat than get all these nutrients, at least acutely, because they're going to have more problems with being like severely overweight. It's going to cause possible increases in heart disease, or risk of stroke, risk of kidney disease, all these things that are so high risk being so overweight, that actually acutely I would rather they just focused on losing body fat rather than worrying about these superfoods and getting all these nutrients in. I don't know how you feel about that yourself, Steve, or if you've had any similar kind of issues with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've actually experienced it with anyone necessarily. I definitely agree that even for health, total calorie intake, factor on, so if it's especially for someone who's overweight, just by bringing, like, there's so many problems someone overweight could have, and they try, and I've seen it where people will try all these different like supplements, these superfoods, and literally all of their health problems come down when they lose body fat, which is to do with calories. And if that means they don't get all their superfoods in, then that's what they should definitely do. And it becomes a real problem. And I think part of the problem is people, I can't believe I used to think this, but I used to think fruit was calorie free. And I literally thought, in my head, you couldn't get fat from eating anything that was like clean. You couldn't.
Yeah.
Eating dirty foods would automatically, you'd start getting fat. So I'd never have dessert. I'd never have anything sweet. Then eating clean foods, you could have as many as you want. And all that would happen was it would go on to body mass, lean body mass.
Lean body mass.
I could eat all the nuts I wanted. I could eat all the fruit I wanted. I used to stuff my face with like fruit and nuts and everything, and it was amazing. And I got really quite fat. I did gain some muscle mass because I was training hard as well, but I could have enjoyed myself so much more, which is really disappointing. I actually wanted to bring back to the topic you said about the drinking liquid calories and the body not recognizing. I think in the study, what they did is they gave people like I think it was like a Coke or something, or it might have been Coke and juice.
Okay.
Same amount of calories, and then in another group they had people eating like it was just sweets, and the people who had the sweets compensated for the calories later. The people having the liquid calories didn't.
Right.
And like in that sort of scenario, you think sweets are better than like fruit juice, but no one would ever think that. And I think in my mind, the reason they compensated is because they chewed on it. And so that chewing sensation, when you chew, you actually release, like the brain starts releasing hormones to signal that it's getting food and it's eaten. Whereas when you drink, you don't get that same benefit. So I thought that was really quite interesting in that, the whole smoothie things really grind on me, because I actually see people they'd go to maybe have a Boots meal deal where they have a sandwich, a snack, and then a drink. And where they might have usually had they get the same sandwich, the same snack, and then the drink, rather than maybe they're getting a Diet Coke, they're picking up this super smoothie that's amazing for them. And then that's adding an extra like 200 calories to their total intake, which their body's not recognizing as extra calories. And then for the rest of the day, they've probably overconsumed by 200 calories, which over the long term leads to fat gain. which isn't what people want. So I think we definitely made it clear that total calories have to be a consideration, and they come before food composition, which is where having the superfoods, they'd be dropped in. But most of the time, these superfoods can be quite calorie dense, the way they're marketed anyway, the ones that you can easily buy and get hold of.
Absolutely. Calories will, it will just never change. Calories are, like you said, they are king, and we have to really get control of that first. But not even, places that we can purchase these smoothies or shakes or whatever it may be. Even doing home smoothies, it's really, really easy to throw 500-600 calories in a NutriBullet and blitz it up and drink it in 10 seconds. That could be so easy done with the likes of these, seeds, or flaxseed, chia seeds, and nuts and things. Even milk. If people are putting in a load of milk into these smoothies, that's just going to add even more calories. Nobody's saying that milk's not, it's not okay to drink milk. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that these liquid calories, it's really easy to overconsume very, very quickly. And I was really interested to hear that that the body doesn't quite, about that study you just mentioned about the body not quite dealing with the same. What it will deal with the same is it will still deal with the same calories, because the calories are still going to be going in there. And whether and I've seen it before. I've seen it with clients' faces when I talk to them about this, and it just becomes like a light bulb moment where they think, I cannot believe I've been consuming that many calories. Like, all I've been doing is going to Starbucks or something 3 times a day and having instead of having like an Americano, they might be having some kind of latte that's just loaded with calories, but they're just literally unaware of it. And I kind of do get quite often this like eureka moment when people finally think, gee, like I had no idea I was consuming that amount of calories through liquid alone. That is quite a popular one.
I know we've painted quite a bleak picture on superfoods, which wasn't our intention, but I think it's because they're so strongly marketed as being superior, better, whereas in reality, and I think I've done probably a post on it, and this is why it's ringing a bell, it's not really a superfood, because we shouldn't be looking at food in isolation. It could be a superfood, part of a super diet, the whole diet as a whole. And in our opinion, if you're getting 80% of your food from wholesome, minimally processed stuff, 20% what have you, that is like a super diet for you.
Yeah.
If it's giving you the right amount of protein, carbohydrate, fat, fiber, calories, and then you're getting that good balance, it's a pretty super diet. It's full of what you should be having. What I did want to talk about on kind of maybe a bit of a final note is, have you noticed with yourself, Mark, or any of your clients, where maybe you've looked at their food diary or you've looked at your own and seen holes where you're like, maybe someone's not getting any dairy, maybe they're not actually eating any like nuts or olive oil or avocado, and they're not getting any of that sort of fat. Like, they're eating maybe not just enough variety. Have you ever seen that? And have you ever experienced it yourself, like feeling the benefits from maybe having something that is nutrient dense and maybe a superfood?
Off the top of my head, I'm not very sure. I think one of the things that I do, I don't just get people to do food diaries just for one reason, to see what they're eating. I kind of skim it to see what their overall nutrition might be, whether they are lacking in certain nutrients, and then we could address it from there. But it's actually really interesting you said that, because even though, like, I know we've said this before, and we're both in this gaining phase at the moment, right? We're gaining body weight. Obviously, we're gaining body weight, but we're not trying to gain weight. We're trying to gain muscles, man. Yeah, I'm not going to do that next to you. yeah, so and I had the strangest kind of thing happen to me just very recently where, so I'm all about carbs, man. Like I will squeeze in as much carbohydrates as humanly possible into my diet, while still kind of being on track. Um, so I've always had a slightly lower fat intake, just by preference. Um, but recently I kind of maintained my weight for a while, and I looked to increase calories. And for this time, whereas before I would have just went, right, let's give me an extra like 20 grams of carbs or whatever. I actually increased my fat intake, and I don't know like the full story of why, or maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's the overall calories. Maybe it is the slightly higher fat intake. But I feel like so much more energy this last few weeks, by having a higher fat intake. Um, because I am, most days I have some nuts, whether it's cashews, almonds. I really like Brazil nuts, so I've got a lot more of these foods in. I love avocado, and yeah, I've noticed within myself a huge difference in my overall energy levels. And I don't know if this is getting a bit gimmicky now or anything, but even like working, I feel like I've just got like, I can concentrate a lot better. And that's all just kind of came the last few weeks with this higher fat intake. So yeah, maybe I was slightly deficient in some way myself, and it's something that I've noticed 100%. And it's quite funny that you bring that up.
What was your fat before and what's it now? Like, if we get some context.
So my fat intake was usually around like in between 65 and 75 grams of fat per day. And now it's up to like 85 or 75, between 85, probably pushing 85 most days. Whereas before, and sometimes before, I'd even struggle to hit that fat target just because, like I said, I'm all about the carbs, man. I was squeezing as much carbs as possible. But now I'm finding that I'm quite easily hitting this fat intake, and I'm just feeling just so much more better for it. 100%.
And your carbs and protein stayed the same, I'm guessing?
For this time, yeah. But it's usually before, I just rammed up the carbs without even thinking about it. So more calories to me used to mean more carbs, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, protein stay the same, and
that's interesting.
Carbs.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, because I was like, sorry.
Yeah, on you go.
I was just checking because I by no means thought that your fat intake would be silly low, but I would see if it was like really low, or how low you've gone. Because I know some people, their gaining phase, they're like, okay, it's not necessarily they're thinking about preferences. They're thinking, okay, I'm going to keep my fat intake low, because in their head, and I mean, scientifically, yeah, fat's easier stored as fat. Carbohydrates are more metabolized for energy. And so I was thinking that maybe, I thought you were going to say having the higher fat intake allowed you to actually start gaining weight, because I was thinking maybe if you had more carbs, it just ramps up its actual kind of thermogenesis effectively. It ramps up its metabolism so much you just kind of absorb it. But no, you said about feeling better and the energy levels, which, like you said, it's so hard to actually know. It could be fat. It could be the fat. I don't know. It could be sleeping. It could be because it's been sunny recently. It could be, there's so many different things it could actually be that you don't know. And it's so hard always. I tell my clients this because often it comes when we're talking about weight, and they're like, why did my weight jump? Why did it come down so low? And it's like, I could say it was this, I could say it was this, I could say it was this. But when we're always looking in hindsight, you know, if I actually know, and actually this is going quite off topic now, but I was literally reading last night about the delayed training effect. So we train and we don't necessarily see the benefit of that training until quite later on. And so you could maybe even do a whole block of training and see, maybe you even see like, you don't see amazing results during that block of training, but your next block of training, you see fantastic results. And so you could maybe assume it's because of that training there and then, but it could have been the delayed training effect from this training. So actually that really made things kind of like light bulbs in my head, and thinking that, yeah, there really is that transfer effect that probably goes on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's when you're talking about your fat intake, I've actually, in a similar sense, think it was similar in that I increased my omega-3s. I was having 3 fish oil capsules a day. I just increased it to 6, just to get to the kind of more closer to the upper end of the recommended dose. And also started dropping in some more kind of peanut butter, some more nuts and avocados, get more monosaturated fats, which, like, the Mediterranean diet has always traditionally been seen as the healthiest diet, and it looks very, like, nuts in the research are very favorable for so many different things. And yeah, I definitely feel better for it. And I don't know, it could even be a bit placebo. You just don't know.
Yeah, and I think, mate, that's a good point. I think this goes on a lot of a tangent as well about people with certain, when they think they've got certain like intolerances to bread or whatever, and then they all of a sudden come on board with a coach. We don't take bread out the diet, but we like give them a calorie limit, and then they start feeling a lot better. It's not that they've cut bread out their diet; it's because their overall diet's better. So it's not this isolation thing. And so yeah, I mean, it could be, but it's always really hard to tell. And that's why I made the point of saying, I'm not telling people to go on a higher fat diet because they might feel better. It's like, it's very individual to me, and it's just something that I've found. And again, it could be the fact that I'm just going through a time where I've got no particular stress. My food intake's really high, so I'm never hungry. Things are good. I've got plenty of energy. It could be a whole host of things, and it's just a coincidence that this higher fat intakes kind of coincided with it. But it's interesting nonetheless, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It on a similar related topic, and we're getting fairly far away from the superfood topic. But I have actually, and I think it's a good time to do it in off season. I've had 2 clients in their off season where I've discussed it with them, and I was only doing nutrition. So I was like, okay, I want to make this a bit more kind of more than just adjusting. So I was like, okay, we're not doing anything for quite a while. Let's try. We've always gone quite high carb. Let's try going high fat, bring your carbs down by quite a substantial amount. I think it was like a 20% reduction and increase on each, keeping calories and protein level.
Yeah.
And see how you perform. And both of them felt better actually on the higher fats. Again, I'm not saying that higher fat's the way to go, but I do think it's worth maybe sometimes trying it. And personally, I haven't done it, and it's something I actually should do. And I recommend if people are going to do that, you have to make it a fairly 100% and then trial it for like 2 months.
Yeah.
So give it an actual long stint. Don't just kind of do it and like the next week change back because you felt awful. Because it probably wasn't the change in diet.
No, yeah, exactly. I think that's important. Give it time. That's the same with everything. Yeah, give it a good go. If you're going to do something, give it a go. Yeah.
So, have you got any closing comments, kind of on superfoods that you want to kind of leave with the listeners, Mark?
Yeah, I would honestly just say that, or try to stop looking at these foods in isolation as being like these superfoods. Again, if you're having a McDonald's breakfast, dinner, and supper, and at the same time you're having a smoothie, a superfood smoothie, then it's not very super whatsoever. It's not going to be doing you any good. If you're foods shouldn't be looked at good or bad in isolation. There is no real superfood, and I would rather people look at their whole diet or the context of their whole diet. Is it nutrient dense? Is it well balanced? Is it varied? And then obviously, the most important thing is how many calories are you consuming, and does that kind of sit with in line with your own goals? Once you've got a rough idea of your calorie intake, then you can, if you like these superfoods, if you want to include them as part of your diet, then fine, but just don't put them on some pedestal and kind of see it as the be all end all, because they're really not. And Yeah, I think that would be the most important thing I'd like people to take away.
That's awesome. I mean, I don't think I could really add anything to what you've said there. You've obviously, context is very important. There's no real superfoods. One thing I do want to leave the listeners with is only because I heard it recently, or saw it on a program, which I think is really, really relates to our topic, and I'm surprised I didn't think of it earlier, is I wanted to leave the viewers with the fact that they shouldn't be duped by marketing and should really try and educate themselves in the nutritional basics, which will allow them to kind of diagnose all different foods, different diets. There was actually I think it was Horizon or something, and basically they gave a marketer chalk and told him to like try and sell it as a health supplement at a kind of superfoods fair. And so he just named it like Norwegian chalk and said it was because it's chalk. I think it was like high in calcium, it was high in some other vitamins and minerals, and was like, it's like, and it had enough like scientific research backed that it could be called a superfood. And he was selling it there at this fair. It was literally chalk that you write on white blackboards with, and people were eating, like they were literally like, I want this chalk. Why haven't I heard about chalk sooner? What's this Norwegian chalk? And he was like, sorry, I don't have any, because he couldn't actually sell it to people because he was ripping them off because it's just chalk.
Yeah.
And people are literally like, when they were told afterwards that it was just like marketing, he didn't lie to you, but he just marketed it really well. And they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought about buying that. And some people are really sad and disappointed that it wasn't what it was. Like it was just like, yeah, it baffled me. And it made me realize how people still like there are people out there that say, oh, it's not the education. People know between good and bad food. But I don't necessarily think everyone realizes kind of the fact that marketers are out there to sell and like, not necessarily deceive, but they're just there to sell. So any supplement or food that is claiming outrageous results, just really put your skeptical cap on.
Yeah, and they're very, very good at it as well. This is what these guys do, and they're very good. But yeah, beware of that. That's a great point, Steve.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I think we kind of gave our thoughts on superfoods and hopefully gave you guys a lot to go away with. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers, guys.